Welcome to the 2 Cents Podcast with Jay Richardson. I'm your host, Jay Richardson. And before I begin, I want to thank you guys for subscribing and for liking. It's been fantastic to get a lot of feedback, both positive and constructive, and to find out what people want to hear about, the kind of topics that people want to get into, or if they just want to hear more of what they've been hearing. Either way, I like it. Don't forget, go to 2 Cents Podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. You can just search my name. You can go to my Instagram, look me up that way, right there in the link. Either way, get to it, like it, and subscribe it, because we're trying to start kind of a community here of people who really want to dig deeper into what's going on in sports. And for those of you who've been listening, I don't try to get too broad, but I try to go deep on a handful of topics, and today is no exception. We're actually going to keep it a little bit more streamlined today on a couple of specific topics that have come up in the sports world, and both involve the sport of football. And I think both are it's important to discuss. The first one, I'm going to try to get through a little bit quicker because I just want to mention it and I want people to understand what's going on. So for those of you who've been paying attention to Big Ten football and Penn State, who, over the last half decade or more have had more than their share of struggles, we can call it. And now the latest one is basically the former team physician for the Penn State Nittany Lions football team is Scott Lynch. He's their doctor, and he is now filing a lawsuit in the Court of Common Pleas in Pennsylvania, basically saying that he was, fired unlawfully, and that Penn State has basically unethical practices. And he's basically pointing at James Franklin, the head coach, saying that he's been directing injured football players to return to the field not fully healthy, not cleared by the doctor, or instructing the doctor to clear them, even though that goes against the oath the doctor took. And this is an official lawsuit. This is going to be, not as a huge issue, I don't think, because I think this is going to get resolved very, very quickly for a couple of specific reasons. One, I think both parties do not want the real facts to come out in this case. I think that Dr. Lynch certainly doesn't want it to be, brought to light that he actually has had to clear a good handful of players who he knew weren't cleared, because that makes him look bad. He could lose his license. And I know that James Franklin in the Penn State organization and school does not want it, to come to light, all the detailed information he has on the times he's asked to have the doctor clear players or to put them back on the field and accelerate their rehab or accelerate the timetable for them to get healthy, which is not something he should be able to do. I guess only God can tell you when you're going to be healthy and how fast you're going to heal. And yet you got a coach saying, look, I need a guy out on the field, and the doctor saying, he's got a knee, looks like a MCL strain. I'd give him 3 weeks. And, Coach Franklin's going, no, I need him out there week and a half, as long as I can wait, so get him out there. Well, that's not how it's supposed to be. The reason I bring this up, and I try to go quick, is because this is not uncommon. I've seen this up close at every level of football, and this is an unfortunate thing. I've only played for a couple of teams who the head coach was very, very strict on not playing guys if they were even a bit banged up, and that was a rare thing. And I remember seeing it and going, wow, that's kind of refreshing. We got a head coach here who's like, if you're hurt, I'm not putting you out there. I don't care if you're a little bit banged up. You could tell that he truly cared about the players, and he took the doctors at their word, and he would not put a guy on the practice field until he felt like that guy could give his all. And I think that's important that most coaches be like that. All coaches should try to be like that. I get the competitiveness of the game. I get the competitiveness of the players, right? Because the player doesn't want to be sidelined. If it's something that I can play through, I've played with a cracked clavicle. I've played with a hairline fracture in my ankle. I've played with a torn MCL. I've played with, concussion, all those things that, you hear about. I've done it. I was a defensive lineman for a very long time, and that is an extremely high impact and physical position. However, if something's wrong to the point where I know I can't go out there and give it my all, and I know I'm going to look bad and put bad stuff on film and put my team at risk, I'm not going out there. And that was just how I was, especially when I got to the NFL and I knew, there's money on the line, and it's a contractual situation, and what you put on film is your resume. You don't want to be out there limping around on the field. It's a bad look, and it'll affect you in the future. So I get that. But in college, these kids are fighting for a chance to get there, so they're going to always tell you they're okay when they're not. It is the doctor's job to look at those X-rays, to look at those MRIs, and diagnose the kid's injury and go, nope, he can't go. And for a coach to override that and go, yeah, he can. That's detrimental to the kid, their families, and the program ultimately. And as someone who's seen it up close with teammates of mine, both in college and professionally, it's very dangerous territory. And I hope that the lawsuit's going to get resolved probably, quickly. The story will go away fast. But I really want people to understand that this happens all over. And, young players out there, if something's bothering you and you're banged up, don't go out there if you can help it. If you can help it, heal, because the reality of it is you're going to have a longer career if you play healthy. If you're going to have a shorter career if you play hurt, and that's just the bottom line. Speaking of healthy and speaking of hurt, let's get into the meat of today's podcast. I really want to dig into this because it was such shocking news. It really caught everyone just off guard. It caught the Indianapolis fans off guard. I guess the Indianapolis brass and coaching staff would say they were a little bit caught off guard, even though I think deep down inside they all knew what was coming. But it actually happened at 29 years old, in the tail end of the preseason, a couple weeks before the opener, a week before the opener. Andrew Luck decides to retire. Huge news. You're talking about a kid who 6 years in, really had an injury-riddled career, never got a chance to see his ceiling, see his full potential. We saw glimpses of it. He did lead a team to the playoffs at a time, and he did play hard. He had a patchwork of an O-line. He was the most sacked quarterback a couple years in a row and really got hit a lot. Concussion after concussion, ankles, shoulder surgeries. At one point, he couldn't throw a tennis ball, and then he worked his way and battled back. And at some point, I think Andrew just said, "I can't do this, man. This is killing me. I just can't do it anymore." He's married. He's got a little one on the way, or I think here. And I think he looked at his life and he looked at where he was and where he wanted to be one day off the field, and thought to himself, if I keep on this path, I don't know that I'll end up where I want to be one day, and win or lose, I still got to take this body with me to my next career, to my next phase of life, and what am I going to have left? And I think that's a question a lot of pro athletes ask themselves, specifically football players. And there's a few things to kind of unpack from this whole incident and story. One, crowd reaction, right? Let's just get that out of the way now. Indianapolis crowd, when it found out at some point in the fourth quarter of that game, and as Andrew Luck left the field, you heard boos ringing out, you heard people yelling and throwing things, and there were a few, classy fans who were applauding him, but there was very audible boos, and I think that's, it's classless, right? It's easy to look at the fans and go, especially as a player, as a former player myself, to go, man, those fans are trash, man. That's Bush League. That's whatever you want to call it. That's classless. But then I think about the fan perspective, because I try to look at both sides of every coin, and I look at it and I go, man, if I'm a season ticket holder, if I'm a guy that, because by the way, it was a preseason game, to see that many fans. First of all, if you're booing at a preseason game, you're at a preseason game. You're a fan right there. If you're attending preseason games and that thing had that many people in it and those boos are that loud, that tells you how serious those fans take their football and how much they love the Colts, and they're all packed in there at a preseason game just wanting to root the team on. And then to find out that your star quarterback, who they were really hoping was going to be ready to go for the opener, is not only is he not going to be ready to go for the opener, he's actually never going to be ready to go again because he's going to retire. That's a bit of a blindside, and I can understand the knee-jerk reaction as a fan to just boo right away, because you're just you're upset, you're disgruntled, you're let down, you feel like you're not getting, you pay for it. It's like you go to the supermarket, right? You see a big old bag of chips or Doritos or whatever you like, and you buy it. You tear the bag open, and they only full like 1/4 of the way. The bag is 3/4 air and like 7 chips, and you're disappointed, right? You're let down. That is what the Colts are. They're only 7 chips, right? You just don't you're not getting the product that you hoped you would get. So I understand that part when it comes to the fans. I really am trying to look at that and go, I can see it. I can see why they'd be upset. I don't know that I'd boo if I was a fan, but I get it. Like, I truly get it. But let's look at Andrew Luck's side of things. Let's look at what he's been through, because I think people just don't understand physically what his body's had to go through over the last 6 NFL seasons. He's torn cartilage in 2 of his ribs. He's had a partially torn abdomen, like his stomach tore somehow. I don't know how that happens. He had a lacerated kidney that left him pissing blood like a boxer. At least 1 concussion. And when they say there's 1 diagnosed, that means you probably had like 6. Torn labrum in his throwing shoulder, and then this past preseason, he had this mysterious calf ankle injury that led to his retirement. Now, some speculate that whenever there's a mysterious calf leg injury, remember Kevin Durant had a mysterious calf leg. Turned out, he popped his Achilles not too long ago. Andrew maybe felt like that was on the way for him, or something. He just did not want to put himself in that situation. But I think what fans got to realize is, man, this guy wasn't going to play for most of the early parts of the season anyway, whether he didn't retire or not. And at this point, he's looking at his life, and he's just looking at his health and his body. You get 1 body, folks. You get 1, and this goes for everybody. I don't care if you're a mailman. I don't care if you are a police officer, a pro athlete, whatever you do for a living. You get 1 body. Take care of yourself. Seriously, the older you will thank you one day. And I think he's looking at it going, dude, as much as I love this game, because you can tell by how this kid plays. He loves football, man. He is a Stanford grad. He's a smart guy. He's a hard-working guy. Every one of his interviews always classy. I loved his retirement, press conference, in which he thanked all of his teammates individually, thanked his coaches. It was very heartfelt. It was emotional, as it should be. It's a big part of his life. It is his life until it's time to move on. And for him to have that part, for him to walk away from that part of his life, should tell you just how just where he was emotionally and mentally with the game of football, not just physically, because as a player who's played with injuries, who's gotten cut because of an injury, who's had to rehab in the off seasons, and it takes its toll, man. It's you take so many things for granted, like walking and being able to reach and grab things, and waking up in bed and just rolling out and standing up on your own 2 feet, right? And then you have a huge injury and you roll out of bed and you can't stand up yet because you have a torn ACL or a torn MCL, or you have a plate that they just did surgery on in your right foot, like I had, and you're not going to be able to really be mobile for the next 6 weeks. That is very difficult, and most young people don't go through those things, right? I mean, no one has to repair their body in their 20s typically, unless they're in a car accident or something happens. Well, NFL players do it all the time. It's routine. You don't even think about it. You just, so and so got hurt. What happened to him? He broke his foot. No big deal. He'll be all right. Like, that's how we look at it, because we've all been there. So and so tore this. He'll be all right. In real life, that's a serious injury that could affect you for the rest of your life. People don't realize that, right? And sure, we have fantastic medical staffs who really do try to do their best to get us back on our feet. But the reality of it is, nothing is ever really the same after an injury. And I think for Andrew Luck, the most important injury he had was to his psyche through all of this. Now he's second guessing everything. Am I really supposed to be doing this? Am I really built for this? Do I really love it this much? Is it even fun anymore? And I think once you get into that, is it even fun anymore? Do I really enjoy the game anymore? And you're truly asking yourself those questions, you got to take a step away from it. Why? Because if you come back to a sport this intense, to a sport this violent, and to a sport where this much on the line, and I mean money, I mean pride, I mean families, guys trying to feed themselves and their kids, and you are not in it 100% and your heart ain't in it, you're going to get hurt. You just will. You're going to get hurt because guys are out here trying to hurt you. And that's just how it is. That's how we're wired. When I was playing defensive end, if I had a blindside shot on a quarterback, I wasn't thinking, let me get him on the ground, or let me see if I can, just make it. No, I was thinking, run through his body. I want to hurt him. If he gets back up after I hit him, I didn't do my job. That's how I was wired at that time in my life. And I think, when you're the target and you're Andrew Luck, he's a big guy. He's 6'5", 240, 50-pound dude. He's not little. But guys my size flying at you every single play, week in and week out, and then in the offseason, all you do is rehab injuries and fight, and then you got to deal with reading the press clippings and going on social media and everyone talking about, man, when's he going to come back and play, and just the pressure to be healthy when you know you're not. So now you're playing hurt just to make people happy, and in reality, you're just hurting yourself more. Yeah, it mounts. So I get that. However, you guys know me. I always got to give you both sides of the coin. Here's the other side to it. Andrew Luck is a kid that comes from, he comes from great stock. He comes from a decently well-to-do family. Some would even say they're wealthy. Like I said, Stanford grad. Parents had money. He grew up with means, and he enhanced his means dramatically. Being a top 5 pick in the NFL draft and then re-ing up on his contract. And, the kid's made millions upon millions of dollars. So some would argue, listen, man, you took the money, play your contract out. Because I notice he's not in a rush to give back that $25 million that was tied into, I guess, bonuses and contractual things where he got his extension, and they assumed he'd continue to play for the next 4 or 5 years, and then for him to retire. A lot of teams usually go, we need that money back then. It happened to Barry Sanders, it happened to Calvin Johnson. If you retire before your contract's up, a lot of teams are going to ask for that money back, and that's how it goes. That's why we have contracts. I mean, that's just part of an agreement. I get that. If you notice, Indianapolis hasn't asked for it back, and I think part of that's because just the PR of it all doesn't look great, and the other part is they're hoping that that the door is open for him to return. If because a year away from football really does make a difference. I know it. I took a year off, came back in, somehow wiggled my way back in and played another couple. So I get it. But to guys who get it out the mud, as they say, right? To guys who come from the dirt, to guys who are out here fighting and scraping and doing the same thing he's doing, rehabbing injuries every offseason and taking hits every game and are in the trenches or, are in a situation where they can't walk away because they don't have the means to walk away. They look at Andrew Luck's situation and because I've heard this from guys and they're like, dude, oh, boo-hoo, you got to rehab. What is he's not mentally tough enough to handle it? I go out here and get my butt kicked and fight and scrape, and I'm only making, 1.5 million or 2.3 million. He's over here making $15, $20 million a year, and he's retiring because his calf hurts or because he's tired of doing rehab. Like, that's what you sign up for, bruh. And I get it. I truly get it. That is what you sign up for. And a lot of guys wish they had the means to walk away from the game, right? A lot of guys wish they came from a family that doesn't need you to loan the money to keep the lights on. It doesn't need you to help, pay the mortgage. It doesn't need anything from you to where all the money you make is your own. And if you want to walk away, you can. That's a nice position to be in. A lot of guys in the NFL are not in that position. 90% of them are fighting and scraping to keep a job. And that's even the ones that we think are rich. They're all fighting to keep a job. So to be able to walk away from that is actually a pretty privileged position to be in. And it also tells you just how unhappy he was. And I think that's the segue into the next part I want to talk about is players, their happiness, the emotional toll the NFL takes on you. And I only mention it because Rob Gronkowski, gave a heartfelt discussion online. I don't know, he was at a conference or something. I just happened to see it. I think he was promoting his CBD THC company. And he was discussing happiness and why he retired early. Same thing as Andrew Luck, almost, I think, about the same age, within a handful of months. A couple guys, 20, 30 years old, and at the height of their game, or at least Gronk was definitely at the height of his game, coming off a Super Bowl. He's a Pro Bowler. And he just says, you know what, I'm good. That was a good run. I made some money. I got my endorsements. I won some Super Bowls. I'll always be looked at as one of the top 10 tight ends of all time. I don't know that a lot of people would argue that. I can walk away healthy, young, and still with a lot in the tank. And he also mentioned, the idea of coming back and not closing that door 100%, but just needing that time away. And one thing he specifically said fell in line with one thing that Andrew Luck specifically said. He said, I wasn't having fun anymore. I didn't love it anymore. The game, I just wasn't enjoying myself anymore. And I thought that was interesting because we see Gronk as this fun-loving, He's almost like the NFL version of like a college frat boy, right? I mean, he's always slamming beers, and he does pro wrestling, and he's always dancing. He's a horrible dancer, but he dances like no one's watching, as that meme says, and I think that's fantastic. He enjoys himself, and I like a guy that can be himself no matter who's in the room. So that's why a lot of guys dig Gronk. Got no problem with Gronk. I just think it's interesting that he walks away, from the game, and one of the last things he discusses are his happiness, because guys don't always, things aren't always what they seem when you watch, NFL, NBA, whatever, any kind of entertainers. It's never what you're seeing. What you're seeing is always them when they're on, like quote unquote on, like they have to be on. Whether you're on camera, you're on a field, you got to be on. And no one ever sees them when they're off, when they're just at home, what they go through, what they're dealing with. And I think people always assume you get that same person all the time. And the reality of it is, a guy can have this dual personality, right? You almost have to be, especially in the NFL, a little bit different than any other sport because of the violence and the physicality. Very similar to like a combat. It is a combat sport, but similar to that, you have to be a certain person. You got to be activated in a certain way when it's time, and then you got to be able to cut it off when it's time. And that's hard to do for some guys. That's why you see guys get into bar fights and get into it, and then you see all the field things happen. It's hard to cut that side off. They ask you to be, this person for this many hours a day, and then now just be, this docile house cat. That's hard to do. And I think, not being able to find some sort of balance in your life will lead to unhappiness. And then you factor in, all the injuries, and you factor in the rehab, and then you factor in public perception and social media and all that. And what you have is a cocktail that is rough to drink, man. And after a while, guys don't want to drink it anymore. And before you know it, guys are just done and they're over it. And it's not even about the money anymore. They just want to be happy. They just want to spend time with their families and be able to do fun things, because the most exciting times in your life sometimes are right in between 25 and 35, that time where you're still young enough to do all those fun things, and you're starting to make a little bit of money that you can afford to do some things. And most of us spend it, in a cold tub or in a rehab facility, and that's not always fun. And sure, guys are making money, and you're happy you can make money, but you'd be happier if you could actually enjoy yourself. And I think that's where we're headed, and I think that's what people have to understand about what these athletes are going through. I say all that to say that the future of the NFL is getting very, very interesting. From Patrick Willis to Gronk to now Andrew Luck, you're seeing more and more athletes deciding to pick themselves and happiness over just money, fame, in the NFL. And I think that's a very interesting thing. I think it'll continue to be that way until the NFL decides what they want to do about keeping their players happier. And I don't know what that means, but I know it starts and ends with guaranteed contracts. And I think that's going to be a huge part of it. And even having guaranteed money will not guarantee these guys happiness, will not guarantee these guys peace of mind. That's something that comes from within, and that's something that comes from feeling loved and feeling taken care of. And when you're playing in the NFL, you very certainly do not feel the love. It's all business, and that's the biggest difference. When young players ask me between college and professional football, what's the biggest difference? Is it the speed of the game? Is it the is it the lights? Is it the people watching or whatever? No, of course not. I went to Ohio State. Everyone's fast there. Most of us go to the NFL. There's tons of lights, tons of people watching. Our stadium seats 100 and almost 20,000. That's not what changes. What changes is in the NFL is, one, all the players are smarter. Everyone's so smart. Everyone's good. Everyone's fast. Everyone's smart. And then two, it's all business. Sometimes you'll see a guy out there that should not be out there, but you go online, look up his contract, and you go, oh, that's why he's out there. And then you can go into a training camp and pretty much tell the guys who aren't going to be getting cut, and the guys who even if they're good will probably get cut just based on their contract, based on the agent relationship, based on their relationship with the coach. And it's all business. It's all very corporate. It's all who you know, and it's no different than any other industry in America. And I think people need to understand that. And I want to leave it there for today. I just wanted to take a different tone today, give people something to think about and to understand that, this game is bigger than just the sport itself. It's bigger than just the entertainment factor, and it's even bigger than, believe it or not, the money. Guys are invested in this thing emotionally, not just physically. And I think when that emotional side is not being balanced out properly, you'll have what we saw with Andrew Luck and so many others. And something will change in the next collective bargaining agreement. I don't know what, but we will stay tuned for that. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. I want you to follow the 2 Cents Show at 2 Cents Show. You can follow that show, follow the podcast. If you have anything that you want to discuss with me, whether it be, reaction to the podcast, or whether it be, proposing some topics or things that you want to hear discussed, please tweet me. It's at JAY Richardson99, or you can just put in Jay Richardson on Instagram. You can DM me. I will respond to everybody because that's how I'm wired. I want to get everyone's feedback. And till next time, folks.